All right, you should be able to see my screen from there. Uh, Tim, give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Okay, you're my check. There we go. Appreciate it. Uh, anyway, today's webinar is about streamlining your Lightroom workflow. I'll tell you why I'm a big fan of thinking in terms of efficiency and all that stuff. And as always, Russell A. Graves coming to you live from Hackberry Farm, Dodge City, Texas. I just got back the other day from a workshop we did in Alaska. I called it Alaska Click and Cruise, and we spent 7 days, I think it was. Yeah, 8 days, 7 nights. Can't remember exactly, but it was about a week. We spent about a week on a luxury yacht, six guests and me, and then the crew on a luxury yacht in Southeast Alaska, sailing around every day, eating better than we all should. I mean, they had a, a trained chef on board who fed us too much food for lunch, supper, and dinner. The food was fabulous. We tooled around looking for bears, looking for whales, saw more whales than I thought I'd ever see in my life, and not just whale tails or whale fins, but whales breaching and whales doing all kinds of stuff and beautiful scenery, uh, sea lions, all kinds of wildlife. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And when we weren't doing that, we were throwing crab pots and shrimp pots, catching our own dinner a couple of nights. So that was fun as well. So just got back from that. When you got the newsletter with that announced this this webinar, thanks to the power of being able to schedule stuff out ahead of time and the internet. I was on the boat when all that went out. So I'm back home now, enjoying about a month off. Before I said a while ago, I'm going to head out to Africa in about a week or about a month. So the reason why I mention all that is when I was on that trip to and this isn't unusual. When I was on that trip to Alaska, I mean, the guests' pictures always come first. And if they don't need help, I'm shooting pictures alongside everybody else just to kind of be as part of the flow and understand the challenges that everybody's having and to be a better teacher. You got to experience it to be a better teacher. And just me not focusing on just my photography, I still shot 20,000 images on that trip, a week long, 20,000 images. Now, a lot of them are repeats. And when you're shooting like that, because you're on a moving boat, you're shooting a lot of stuff just for insurance. But either way, when you get those pictures back home, you got to find a way to streamline your Lightroom workflow so you can peel through all those pictures in a real fast and efficient manner, and that way they're not stacking up on your hard drives or stacking up on your cards. You're able to deal with them in the moment, get through with them, and then move on to your next task. So in that spirit, that's what we're talking about today. Now, I excuse me, if I was going to assess myself at my ability to use Lightroom, I think I'm pretty good at it. I've used it for a long, long time. In fact, version 1 of Lightroom I started using a long time ago. The For me, the fork in the road came when I first started shooting digital photos almost 20 years ago. Be 20 years ago in September that I started taking digital photos. I knew one of the problems I was going to have overall was you don't get a camera to shoot fewer pictures. I mean, every one of us buy a camera knowing we're going to shoot more pictures. And so because of that, I started trying out these different versions of how can I manage my image library and how can I streamline this inevitable process of, once you take the pictures, your work's not done yet. You still got work to do. And so I started using two programs at the same time. One was called Apple Aperture, which is now discontinued. Another one was Lightroom version 1. Started using that. Really liked both systems, but I switched to Lightroom because their catalog system, the way I could catalog my images was easier to do with Lightroom in the beginning than it was with uh, Apple Aperture program. And so I gravitated to Lightroom. Glad I did. Spent all my time here now. Lightroom, I'm not going to say it's a perfect program because it's absolutely not. It does have some limitations to it, but I think right now it's the best of what we have. And every time a new version comes out, it gets incrementally better over time. And so I think it's pretty good. And so one of the things that I really feel like I'm good at with Lightroom, I know how to use all the tools. I've been using it for a long time. I'm going to say at least 15, I don't know how long it's been out, 15, 16 years, something like that. I've been using it for a long, long time, but I feel like my big strength, if I can pat myself on the back a little bit, I feel like my big strength is figuring out how to be efficient with all of this stuff. And the reason why I say that is number one, before I started doing workshops, I made my living as a commercial and editorial photographer. So I would shoot pictures for magazines and I'd have to, or commercial clients, I would have to get through those pictures quick and then get them back out. And so time, those adage, time is money, was absolutely true for me. So I did it for a business standpoint, but more importantly, I did it from just a laziness standpoint. If I'm being honest about it, I would rather be out doing a million other things than sitting in front of my computer all day. And so I've tried to work through systems, develop ways of not cutting corners for quality's sake, but cutting corners for just efficiency's sake to make this whole thing streamline and make it work as quickly as I possibly can. And I'm still looking for ways to become more efficient and streamline the workflow that we all use when we're using Lightroom. If you're in any kind of business at all, I saw one of our guests, he's in the construction business. You're always looking to streamline those operations, make them work as a, in whether it's construction business or any other kind of business, make the tools that you have working for you work more efficiently for you so you can get more out of them. And that's what the spirit of this is in today. So I say all the time, I want to make this a dialogue, not a monologue. I'm going to go through some tips and techniques and strategies for you. I'll show you some demonstrations. So I'm going to have, it'll be a little bit cumbersome from time to time. I'll have to switch from one window to the next. So bear with me on that. As we go through these things, I'm going to show you some tips, some of which you may know, some of which you may have never seen before, but I'm going to share with you some tips on what I do to help streamline the way I work on things. And by the way, those 20,000 images I took when I was in Alaska, I probably spent, I'm not completely done with them, but I bet I haven't spent more than about 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours going through all those images, picking out the good ones, getting rid of the bad ones. And the last thing I like is keywording some of them, but I'll get to that. I put myself on a hiatus for that just for the time being. Move these windows over. And so the big question is, why would you want to streamline? Why don't you just take it like it is? And I've mentioned before, you want to be, I want to be efficient in the way I work. I'd rather do any other thing than sit behind a computer all day or just sit all day. That kind of gets to be a little much for me. I mean, I got a million things I could do. I either need to do or want to do outside. I'd rather be out taking pictures because, I've mentioned this before. If you've heard me say this before, the way to get better at taking pictures is just to go take pictures. Just practice at it, and refine your technique along the way. You just can't just practice without refining your technique. But that's the way to get better is just take pictures. And so one of the reasons I streamline, it's about simplicity and efficiency. I want to make my process every time I come sit in front of my computer. I don't want to have to dread it. I want it to be a necessary process that I have to do to get to where I'm ready to start taking pictures again and start ingesting pictures into the system again. And so if you've heard me do webinars before, I talk about the math of this, of being efficient all the time. And so I'm going to bore you for a brief moment on doing the math, but here's what the math looks like. If you shoot, I shot 20,000 images a week. That's not unheard of if you go on very many workshops or very many photo trips. But if you shoot 20,000 images a year, which is, I don't think a lot. And if you can figure out a way to save 4 seconds per image, just you're not having to move the mouse around looking for something on the screen. You've created some efficiencies on your workflow, on how you process those images. You figured out a way to catalog them so you can find them a lot quicker. If you can figure out a way to save 4 seconds per image, which I think that's pretty lean. I think you can save a lot more than that, but just 4 seconds. Let's think about 4 seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. I mean, that's the amount of time you'd spend running your mouse around on the screen looking for something. But if you can figure out a way to save 4 seconds per image, believe it or not, that equates to 22.22 hours of time. That's half a work week that you spend on 4 seconds per image. Now it scales from there. If you think about that same concept, you can go up. I think in reality, it's more like you're figuring out how to save 10 to 15 seconds per image. And so then you can see how the hours start stacking up. The more images you do, the more time it takes. And so 22.22 hours, that's real time. All of us were blessed with varying talents, varying skills, our ability to think about things and do things. But the one thing we all have the equal amount of that you can't change is we all have the equal amount of time. And so anything I can do to save that time, is more time I get to spend taking pictures, more time I get to spend looking at my chickens outside, more time I get to spend with my family, more time I get to spend on the boat, more time I get to spend doing all those other things that I enjoy instead of just sitting behind a computer all the time. Now, I will say this, some people may really enjoy that. That's just not me, but and so that's why the whole point of this is trying to be efficient. If you watch my last webinar last month, making something out of nothing, that technique I showed y'all on how to do a silhouette, that's exactly what I did to this one here. This was a bison on a ridge in Oklahoma that was against a pretty uninteresting background, and we're able to kind of change it all using a couple simple techniques. So if you haven't seen that webinar, go to my website, hackberryfarmtexas.com. It's already online. You can look up. So first thing talk about doing is cleaning up your workspace. And so doing that, we're going to look at cleaning up the header bar, clean up the develop panel, and clean up the left panel. And then I'm going to show you how to do that. So bear with me for a second while I switch screens. You ought to be able to see Lightroom Classic there. Let me move some stuff around. And what I mean by cleaning up, this is pretty much how Lightroom comes. By the way, my name's not Ryan Graves. That's my son's name. The whole program's registered under his name. I'll tell you about that offline. Anyway, so when you're looking at Lightroom, this is pretty much how it comes. You got all these choices on the right-hand side. You got all these choices across the left. So one of the things that I do, and I set it back today, one of the things I do is start trying to clean up because you got library, develop, map, book, slideshow, print, and web, all these modules at the top that most of which I never use. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but you can control click on Mac or right click on PC, and then it'll give you a choice like I never use that web one, I never use the print one, I never use the slideshow, I never use the book, and I never use the map. The only two modules I ever use in Lightroom is library and develop. Now that's me. You may be different, but one of the things I do is instead of having all those choices that I've got to look at, the amount of time and believe me, this sounds crazy how much time we're looking at streamlining things, but the amount of time just moving the mouse back and forth adds up over time. It really does. And if you take a lot of pictures, the cumulative amount of time every one of those repetitive motion takes, it's going to add up. I promise you that. And it's going to make that 4 seconds we talked about earlier look like child's play. You're looking to save more time. So that's what I'm talking about. Cleaning up the front that's what I'm talking about. Clean up the top panel, clean up the right panel. You've got all these that are already in here we're in the library module now. You can click all of these same way, right click, and then it'll give you a choice of what you can leave or what you take away. Usually on this one, I don't really mess with it much. It's like it is. But one of the things I do like is this solo mode that it has here. And so what that solo mode does is if you open like quick develop, it closes another one. And so if you open, I can't see part of my screen. So if I open up the keywording, it closes quick develop. And so in other words, it's not cluttering that screen on the side where you're having to scroll back and forth all the time looking for what you're working on. And that'll make more sense when the develop module. Over here on the left side, in the library menu, one of the things that there's not much to clean up here. These are all my folders I've got where I store my images that you see over on the left side. But one of the things that I think is really valuable is it allows you to customize, like my main hard drive. This is where I call my main hard drive the old folks home. This is where all the pictures I've already taken kind of go to live out the rest of their lives when they're in permanent storage. But see, right now it's just telling me it's online. If you hover above that, it'll give you some information about how many photos, like 835,000 photos on that drive. I've got 1.59 terabytes of free space. I'm running out of space. I need to get more. And then total 24 terabytes on that drive. Now, if I right click it, you can change what that tells you. You can do photo count. You see it change it there. Oops, clicked the wrong one. Or you can do, I like this space. Shows how much space is left and how much is there is total. Just a quick reference again, so you're not having to go search around hunting for that stuff. Now in the develop module that we're looking at here, we're going to do the same thing. We've already cleaned up our header bar. We got rid of all those things we're not using in the top. And again, all I did is right click that top header bar and deselect the things that I don't need. And so just all I use is library and develop. And so here, these are all the this may be, I think it's all that right now, all these different tools over here on the right, the basic, the tone curve, the color mixer, the color grading, the detail, the lens correction, all that's, it's a lot. It's a lot. But there's some that I never use. And so what you can do in Lightroom is, again, you can control click on Mac or right click, or I mean, I'm sorry, uh, left click on PC. I think I said right click, and you can customize the develop panel. And what it does is it opens up there like color grading. I never use that, so I can take that off. What else do I not use? The calibration, I'll use that some. Effects, I'm a tone curve, I rarely ever use. So I'm gonna take that off. The color mixer, I never use. So in other words, when I save that, if you notice, it gets rid of all the stuff that I don't need. So that's just less stuff I'm having to stumble over as I'm looking for what I do need. Now, I it's for me, I think about it like this. When you walk into your living room, you don't want shoes laying all over the floor that you have to walk around all the time, and they're just going to be in the way. And so to declutter your living room floor, you take those shoes and put them in the closet. You still got the shoes, they're just in a place where they're stored away, where you're not having to stumble over them all the time. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about here. When you get rid of these features, they're still in Lightroom. You just put them in the closet where you can't see them and mess with them. And they're not there to stumble over all the time. And so you can take all of these tools and just only have the ones that you need over there. Another thing you can do too is you can put it on solo mode like we talked about before, or that way if I open up just the basic adjustments that we all use in Lightroom, it closes the other ones. And let's say if I want to go to details, see, it closes basic. And the reason why is it, again, for that, it keeps all that stuff right front and center for you without you. Because I mean, let me turn off solo mode. I am bad about this, or I was in the past, but I'm bad about having a bunch of these windows open and then you're having to scroll back and forth looking for what you need to find, when just to make that a little more efficient, all you've got to do is just, again, uh, turn on that solo mode. And that way you've only got the tool that you need right in front of you at any given time. Said it before, I'll reiterate this part. Those little things like that they don't sound like much, and moving that mouse around doesn't sound like much, but if you do it enough and you do that same motion repetitive over and over and over again, those little things really make a difference, and they just speed up how fast you can work. And I'm telling you, I can plow through 20,000 images in just a couple of nights and be done with it. I would spend longer, but I can't. I mean, I could physically do it, but I don't want to sit at a computer for all day long. And so I'll just break it up into smaller chunks, and it just makes a lot more sense. And so talked about cleaning up the top panel, talked about cleaning up the right panel, and on the left panel, same way. You can, all these different things over here. Like me, I never use collections. I've got it there now, but you can take collections off. I like using history. That kind of tells us all the recipe we used to edit an image the way we did it. Snapshots, I never use that, so I can take that one off. And then I use presets from time to time. And again, turn on solo mode. That way it's if I decide to use presets, my history turns off. And then you can always turn those things back off again if you want to. Again, the whole thought of being, like I said before, you're just going up and cleaning up the floor of your bedroom, putting the shoes in the closet, just getting them out of the way for now, so that way you don't have to walk around them or stumble over them all the time. And it helps you get efficiently across that room, just like it helps you be more efficient when you're using these develop modules in Lightroom. I think that one thing I just showed you of cleaning up all these panels and customizing them for you, when if you decide to adopt the way I'm telling you to do, you're going to see in pretty short order. Once you get used to it, there's a little bit of learning curve, because all of a sudden we start taking stuff away, it looks a little bit different. But once you kind of get over that learning curve, and it doesn't take long to get over, but once you start getting over that learning curve, you're going to see how quickly you're able to get things done. And so that's just step number one. So I need to get me a giant computer screen that has multiple monitors, or I can see more. I got some chat coming in here. Let me answer those before I go on. Uh, Christine asked, do you have any posts or webinars on how to reorganize all the images in Lightroom catalogs, especially if you have multiple external hard drives? Well, I'll tell you what, Christine. Well, save that question. I'll get to that towards the end of the webinar. So bear with me on that one. That's a good question, by the way. Let me go back to, okay, back to this one. There's another thing I use is quick collections. And in general, I don't use collections. I know, when you talk about using collections in Lightroom as opposed to filing everything in folders, it's the same as what's the, it's like the other argument I use all the time is it's like Google Maps. If you put in Google Maps, how do I get from my house to Tim's house? It's going to give me three different directions or three different choices, but all three get me to the same place. It's just whatever you like to use. But so I'm talking and not collections in general. I don't use those, but I use quick collections a lot. And the reason why I use quick collections is, let me go back to my demonstration. It's pretty easy on quick collections. Let me go back to library here. If you notice here on the left-hand side under the catalog tab, I've got 11 images in quick collections. These are the pictures I'm going to be demonstrating on for you here in a little bit. And so what quick collections do is you can go through, these are a bunch of unedited pictures here. So people ask me sometimes, how do you take such good pictures? And I tell them you don't get to see the bad ones. And you're going to get to see some bad ones. What quick collections is, you can just go through and make some real fast selections on pictures you want. And then you hit the button B and it just puts all those in the quick collection box. And so that little way of doing things, I don't have to create the name of a collection. I don't have to go through all those steps to make that collection. I'm just putting them in the quick collection, and those are the pictures I'm going to work on at one particular time. And I'm going to show you how this works together in a minute when we get to that part. And then, but again, what's good about that is it's shaving off pieces of time on how long it's taken me to do this whole process. That was the Aurora Borealis over my farm last or May a year ago. And so this is where it really kind of gets into the meat of everything, speeding up your editing. There's a couple of different parts of being efficient. One is just the job of going through those images and going through them quick and picking out the good ones for the bad ones. There's starting to be some AI solutions for helping you do that, but I've tried some of them and they're not. I think they're pretty good with people pictures, but I don't know that they're so good with nature and wildlife pictures, because so much we take, there's not it's not as cut and dried, as it's not as easy to train as I think it would for the AI computers to train on real people. And so they're not perfect. And so until that system perfects itself, I've still got to go through my images one on one. So there's a way of speeding up your workflow, just going through the pictures and looking at them. And then there's the other way of speeding up your editing. And so those two things combined, I said 4 seconds earlier, that may be combined to be 20 or 30 seconds per image. So you can see how this time starts adding up as we get into each little step here. And so when we talk about speeding up your editing, here's my quick workflow on every image I do from beginning to end. And since you registered for this webinar, I'll talk about that later, but you'll get more about this as after the webinar is over today. I use the sync button, and then I hit auto, and then if needed, I go through just a pretty quick adjustments there, and then I'm kind of done with it after that. So the editing process goes pretty quick. And then again, another demonstration. Let me show you that. And so what I mean by that is use the sync button. If you, let me move these zoom windows. These zoom windows are all right in my way. So I apologize for me having to move stuff around all the time so I can see my screen. Okay, so if we're in the library module, and this is my quick collection I talked about earlier, I just went through a bunch of pictures, selected ones I wanted to work on, pressed B to put them in the quick collection, and then now I have them here. So I'm going to select all the images in that quick collection. And I just use Command A. And those shortcuts are really good because, again, it's all about shaving time off the process. And on the Command A, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the develop menu. And so on the bottom here, and here's the key one. If I where it says sync there, if I hit that little switch and I change it to auto sync, when I hit the button auto sync, oops, I'm sorry. Hang on, my computer's got to catch up. My computer's running a little bit slow. Let me start over. I hit a glitch somewhere. I'm gonna select all my pictures. I'm gonna turn on the sync button, and I'm going to go to develop, and then I'm gonna hit auto sync on that. And it should. Anyway, when you hit auto sync, what it does, if you hit auto, it'll automatically apply the settings to a bulk of images at one time. And it doesn't apply the same settings to each one. It goes through, there we go. That's why I'd already hit auto on the other one. That's why I did it. But anyway, if you notice this, I'm gonna start over again on this. If you notice on this frog, since the auto sync is turned on, when I hit the auto button up here, because that's the second step I do in this process, I'll hit auto. I think this may be sacrilegious for some Lightroom purists, but I think Lightroom is getting better at better. If you bring in a generally good picture, something that's properly exposed and doesn't have a lot of work to do, auto does a pretty good job, at least of giving you a good starting point on where to edit. And so the first thing I do on almost every image I edit is I'll turn on auto. I'll select all the images. I'll turn on auto sync, and then I hit auto. And what that's going to do is it's going to for all those images I selected, it's going to look at the image, and then it's going to make its own automatic changes based on that image. So it's not like one auto changes for all the images. It looks at each individual image, and it makes the changes accordingly. My computer's moving slow, but if you look in the bottom corner of these, if you look in the bottom corner of these pictures, you can see that there's been edits made to that. So it's going to make those edits. And again, probably because we got too much going on while my computer's running slow. But once those edits are made, it gives me a starting point. If we look over here at the basic exposure functions, it gives me a starting point of what it's going to look like. Now, in my experience, most of the time, if Lightroom gets anything wrong, it's usually exposure. They tend to overexpose or underexpose a little bit. So, but I'm looking at this picture and it looks pretty good. And there's the exposure I thought it had. And so I'm going to underexpose it just a little bit. I thought it looked pretty good. And so once I hit auto sync, and this wasn't a very articulate demonstration of this because I had something off. That's my fault. But once you hit auto sync, and then you hit auto and it makes it auto adjustments to all those images, then I'll go to each individual image and I'll take a look at it for my final quality assurance. And if it looks good, I just move on to the next one. If it doesn't look good, usually in this order, I'll adjust the exposure. I'll look at the highlights and the shadows and the whites and the blacks. Usually it's me adjusting the blacks or the shadows, and that's kind of my preference. And it's like food, you season it to taste. And then usually for just a little bit of pop, I'll hit clarity. And it's not much clarity. There's clarity way on out, but it's usually just a little touch of clarity to kind of make everything pop a little bit. Then I go into the next image. And so there again, it's already at its auto exposure. And then, well, I'm going to skip that picture. I'll come back to that one because I'm going to skip that one too because that comes to some advanced things I'll talk about in a minute. Uh, like that one here, this burrowing owl, you can see it's already moved the sliders for me. All I'm going to do is just make a couple of quick adjustments. I adjusted the exposure. It looks good. I move on to the next one. And so by doing that, it's that auto sync and then hitting auto where it goes ahead and it adds all those auto adjustments to all my images is really a big time saver because again, it's saving you from having to come over here and click on the next image, then go up and hit auto each and every time if it's already doing it for you. I mean, it's just a real quick time saver. See, like that picture there to my eye, it overexposed a little bit. And again, all I'll do is adjust the exposure and then everything else looks good. I move on to the next one. So my point is I'm checking on each image, but a lot of these micro adjustments that it makes to the in the basic panel look pretty good to me. And Lightroom does a real good job of adjusting that. So I kind of leave it at that. Now, I'd mentioned that those workflows I do are pretty basic. Oops, I'm sorry. Hang on. That workflow I do is pretty basic because again, for most of my pictures, if you come in with good imagery or well exposed images, then Lightroom can do the rest of the heavy lifting for you. Now, let me go back to this. Oops, wrong one. Too much switching back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go through this again because, like I said, I kind of stumbled over that in the beginning because of something I did wrong. So I'll go back over it with you again. So here's my quick workflow from beginning to end. Every picture I do, I'll select all the images that I want to edit. I'll turn on that sync button at the bottom right, like I showed you. Then in the develop module, hit auto and it applies auto settings. It looks at every image and it does it quick. It looks at every image and adjusts them like Lightroom thinks it should be. Then I'll go back through them again and just check them. And then if needed, I go in this order: adjust exposure, adjust shadows, adjust whites, adjust clarity to taste, and then adjust the white balance if I need to. Hardly ever need to adjust the white balance. There are some specific instances where I do want to adjust it, but for the most part, that adjust white balance is done. So I don't know the exact percentage. There's no way I can quantify it, but I'm going to say for 85 or 90% of the images I ever edit, that's all I ever do to them, and then move on to the next one. And so just by doing that, it helps really speed things up. And then some other quick tips I want to share with you are duplicating filters, some keywording tools, and then looking at developing a little bit of a logical filing system. So I'm going to go back to Lightroom here. Let me show you what I'm talking about on the filters part. So I'll show you this one first. Once I've done those initial edits like this one here, I'm gonna tone it down. Everything else, I may make the blacks a little blacker. I want to kind of make it moodier, those mountains. This is in the Great Smoky Mountains. And then I may adjust the white balance, kind of make it a little more blue and a little more smoky. But a lot of times when I get to a picture like this, I'm thinking, okay, I need to add one more thing. And that's where I go into the mask. A couple of masks I really like using. There's all kinds of masks you can use in Lightroom. But instead of just selecting the sky, I like the linear gradient mask. And what the linear gradient mask does is it's like if you look at the top of the windshield on your car, where it goes from tinted to not tinted, it does that. I think it's a more natural look than just selecting the sky and changing the sky. But the pink area shows us where it's going to be affected. And so by doing that, by selecting a layer mask, then all I can do is just drop down the exposure a little bit and kind of make the exposure match. Now look at it. If it looks good, I'm done. I'm doing this in a quick way. And so that's one way I use mask. Another way I use mask is like this picture, this bighorn sheep. This picture is shot in the middle of the day, really backlit. We've got a lot of bright up front. There's a lot of different things you could do to this image, but if we go back to our If we go back to our base menu here, you can see there's a little bit of adjustment maybe I can do. Like I can open the shadows up a little bit, but you know, it's still not like I want it. But here's where another time saving tip for you on using mask. On this one, I'm going to use the radial gradient. And because what I want to do is brighten up the eyes a little bit. So I'm going to make a circle and put over one eye. What's cool about these things is you can right click it and it'll bring up a dialog. I right click that circular mask and then oops, hang on, let me do that again. Got to click it right in the middle. That's what I didn't do. So I click that circular mask right in the middle and I'm going to duplicate that mask. And so it's going to make me another one. And then I'm going to move that one over the other eye. What's cool about this, and this is a time saving tip, you can see it looks like he's got red sunglasses on, but that's just showing you the area that's going to be affected by the mask. If I change the exposure, it changes them both at the same time and in the same amount of, in the same way. And where that's important is if you're like I'm trying to attempt to do here, brighten up the eyes a little bit in that picture. And I think that looks a lot better than it did before. It adjusts those masks at the same rate, as opposed to you having to make one mask, adjust it, and then make another mask and adjust it. Just a time saving tip. And so you can see here, if we open up the history, that's the way the picture started. And then just brightening those eyes a little bit. Now that we did it together, you can see that I brightened those eyes a little bit. But if you just came across this image and you didn't know what we did, it just got brighter eyes. And so that right there was before we brightened the eyes, and that's after. You can see the difference there. And so I think that brightening eyes, and again, making a radial mask, duplicating that radial mask, and then moving it to where you want it on the other eye, and then adjust them at the same time, huge time saving tool. Same thing here, and I didn't think about this on if you're using a radial gradient. One of the challenges you run into, and I'm thinking about a picture I did of Schwabacher's Landing and the Tetons. One of the things you can do there is you can adjust the mountains on the top, but on the bottom, the reflection doesn't look the same. So just like on the radial gradient, you can duplicate the mask, and then it duplicates it there. Oops. Here's our duplicate mask. And then you can invert that mask. And so in other words, when you adjust the top and then adjust the bottom, it's going to adjust it at the same, just like we did on the eyes. It's going to just make the same adjustments at the exact same time as you did the other ones. And it's a real handy time saving tool. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, so on keywording tools and develop a logical filing system, a lot of people don't do this, but it does save time. Just like I was talking about earlier on AI, using artificial intelligence, AI, the keywording software, I just haven't found a good solution that works well for me. So one of the things that I do still is I keyword manually. And I say manually, you know, you could go over here to the right and type all the keywords in at one time, but I'm not a big fan of that solution. I have found an add-on to Lightroom that I really like, and you can keyword all your images like this. Here's what I like about it. It lives here in the plugin extras. It's called My Keyworder for Lightroom, and I can tag, like I'm just going to tag one of these individually, and it's going to give me a pop-up there asking for a donation. It's free to use, but the guy asked for a donation, and I donate money from time to time because it has saved me a pile of time. But you can see the picture there of the you can see the picture there of the burrowing owl. And so what I can do there is I know it's a burrowing owl, and I can type that in one time, and then I can tell this My Keyworder to search for keywords, and it'll go through its database, and it'll find all the keywords it has in its database related to burrowing owl. Now you can auto identify, again, that works okay, but it's not great. But then all I got to do, instead of sitting there typing, I'm just going and clicking all the all the keywords I think applies to this image that'll help me find it later. And then hit the right arrow and it's going to apply all those to that keyword, that image. Then I'm going to save the keywords to that image. And so you can see there, it went from zero, it went from nothing in that field. Now it's got all the keywords in it. And now you can not only do that with one picture, I could take all, let's say I had 1,000 pictures of a burrowing owl. I could select them all at one time and apply those keywords to every image at one time, as opposed to going image by image, adding those keywords, or as opposed to copying and pasting. You're selecting all the picture, using my keyword or plus, and then being able to apply a bunch of keywords to the same types of images over and over. Now I use keywording. If you see here, I've got these color labeled. I use color labels. This is a whole other webinar that I've done in the past. Again, you can find it on managing your digital collection, I think is what it's called, on my website. You can watch that, but it talks about the exact strategies that I use to really organize my pictures. So this, when we talk about keywording and talk about the local filing system, that's more in the organizational schemes of things. But I think that's important. At least it's important for me, because I still do magazine work. I still do some commercial work. And it's important for me to be able to go find the images that I need. Like uh, this morning, I got a request from a magazine looking for a specific picture. Now, to save me time, instead of me going through hard drives and looking through a bunch of different files and folders, I developed this system a long time ago that I can find just about any image out of 835,000 in that one catalog. I can find any image just in a couple of minutes. It doesn't take me very long at all to find them. And so, but the way I do that is use colors, I use keywords, and then I use I'll just show you right here if you can see it very well. This is my filing system I use, where it's kind of an old school way of doing things. Think about a file cabinet where things would be filed by subject, and then you would have folders within folders, with the being a little more specific. So here's a good one here. Like in this mammals folder, if I click that, you'll see all these different categories of mammal pictures I've got. If you click on Africa right there, there's all the pictures I've shot in Africa of different mammals there. If you click on dolphin, for example, there's all the different pictures I've got of dolphins I've taken over the years. And the color labels you see are more the selects. That's the ones I end up selecting in the end. And so coming up with a logical filing system and keywords, it's kind of it's a customized thing that people can do. It's not necessarily, it's hard for me to say this is the way you should do it and this is the only way you should do it. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. But it's best for you to develop your own ways, so that way it makes sense to you and you can go through finding it. So I'll reiterate a little bit on this stuff, which I've already showed you the demonstration on that. Let me go through. Before we get to questions, I'll reiterate a little bit on this. Again, what I've showed you today is really three main things: is cleaning up your desktop space on Lightroom, just so you're not stumbling over tools that you don't need. You've only got the tools that you will use in front of you. Believe, and I've said this before, but I'm going to triple and quadruple down on it. Just having stuff out of the way makes so much difference in how fast you can go through your images and work through them quickly. The second thing is developing kind of a consistent process for your editing workflow. Now, we all know that there's a lot of images that need a little more work than others. But for most of your images, I would argue, if you've taken pictures for any length of time at all, I would argue most of your images, if you follow that simple workflow like I did, where you select all the images you're going to edit, you turn on auto sync, and then you hit auto, just that 3-step process I bet will get you 90% of the way that you need to do on editing the rest of your pictures. And again, you're saving all that time traveling around the real estate of your screen with your mouse. You're saving all that time of adjusting each individual image over time. And I'm going to show you that again, because again, I kind of bumbled that at first. I'm going to walk through that thing with you one more time before we take questions. But again, it's a matter of just doing the same thing consistently over and over again. And then you do those same 5 or 6 steps. And then if you need to work on a picture more, then you can. You're looking forward to it, because you're not having to slog over every single picture. Most of the pictures you kind of move past, you go back and edit give extra attention to the ones that need extra attention to. Uh, and then the last thing is turning on those extra things on Lightroom, like developing a logical filing strategy and developing a keywording system if that's something you want to do, and using those extra little tools like duplicating the mask where it doesn't sound like much, but that stuff adds up over time. Duplicating the mask so when you're trying to brighten the eyes on animal, it will brighten them both equally instead of you having to create one mask, adjust it, create another mask, adjust it. It's just those little simple things that we talk about uh, really do go a long, long way. So I'm gonna, like I said, I feel bad because I feel bad I stumbled through that part earlier because it was just something I didn't have right. Let me go back to quick collection. So again, on quick collection, or whatever you got your images at, you're going to select them all at one time. That's the first step. You're going to make sure this auto sync. This is how it defaults in Lightroom. It just says sync, but you got to flip that switch and make it say auto sync. And then when you go to develop, if you hit auto, it's going to make all of those changes. It just said right there real quick, auto updated for 11 images. It's going to make all those changes at one time. And again, each change it's going to make to an image will be based on that image. It won't be a universal change against all of them. So there, all I've got to do is just go through. Like this picture here, I think it looks good for the most part. If I'm gonna do those adjustments and go down the line like I talked about, looking at the shadows and the blacks and the whites and the highlights, all that looks good to me here. Really, the only other thing I would adjust beyond that is I'm going to add a mask, and that mask is going to be a linear gradient because I really like using those for skies. And then I'm just going to drop the exposure a little bit, make the clouds pop a little more, making the top brightness equal the bottom brightness so your eyes kind of go right to the middle to the river where it's supposed to. And so I like doing that as well. And then moving on to the next image. And when I get there, I look at it. If it all looks good and I don't need to do anything else, like that picture looks pretty good to me, I'll go to the next one. We already worked on that one. We know what we'd do there. We worked on that one. We know what we'd do there. Again, one thing I didn't include is if you crop a lot, which I tend not to crop a lot, but that's one of the last step I'll do is I'll crop. Now, let me tell you this, when you do crop, this is a little bit off subject, but when you do crop, it renders the last auto you did useless. And so sometimes you might have to hit auto again just to see what it's going to look like. It should look good, but just know that it resets the auto whenever you crop in like that. So with that said, let me go back over to my keynote and ask if there's any questions. We got a few chat in here, so let me open up the chat and answer those. Christine says, what about the new Adobe adaptive option? There's a lot of different options there, Christine, so I'm not sure exactly which one you're talking about. And then Lori asked, where is the auto button to use after the auto sync? It's up in that basic panel, Lori. I just showed you. And if you get lost on that, just let me know and I'll guide you to that. Do you make any photo adjustments before you hit sync? And that's Barbara's question. No, like I just showed you again, my apologies. I just had one thing off and it was inartful. It was an inartful demonstration I gave you first. I'll select all the images, turn on auto sync, hit auto. That's the first three things I do. And it'll make those adjustments for me before I make any other adjustments. Now, once you make those auto adjustments, let me warn you here, you got to turn auto sync off after that, because if you're adjusting exposure on one, if all those images are still selected, it's going to make them on all of them. So once you get your auto done, you turn off auto sync. And then Lori asked, what's the name of the keyword add-on? I'm going to put it right here. Oops, if I can spell keyword. I'm going to put that in the chat. It's called My Keyworder for Lightroom. And I'll remember when I send the email replay out to everybody, I'll remember to put that link in there too, that I referenced that. And then somebody says I'll be using keyword on images. However, when I go back to some of the older pictures, the keywording is all gone. What am I doing wrong? I don't know about that. Uh, I'm not I'm not sure about what's going on there. Maybe that's something we could jump on later on and kind of work through and figure out. And then Lori says, how to create a file system like yours from keywords. Well, the file system is separate from keywords. So the keywords are built into the images. So the way I do things, but you could, I think the way I teach it, because it's a pretty basic way of starting. And the reason why I do the file system the way I do it, Lori, is because back when I first started shooting digital cameras, it took me quite a while to kind of figure out how am I going to organize all these pictures because I want to be able to find stuff. And so once I came up with my organizational scheme, it was just a pretty simple scheme. And I wanted to keep it simple so that thing way it would be portable across all different systems, because it could have been Lightroom might have went out of business and Aperture is what I had to keep. So I wanted to develop a system that was portable and would make sense for long term and not just be esoteric to that one particular term or one particular time. Uh, and so I would say on creating a folder system, just come up with something that makes sense. Like I said, mine go, the dates don't matter to me. If I was an event photographer like weddings and stuff like that, dates would matter. But since I'm a subject photographer, it doesn't matter to me if a bighorn sheep picture was taken in 2012 as opposed to 2025. I just want to know it's a bighorn sheep. And so I'll create a folder that says bighorn sheep. So that's the first thing you got to think about is what makes the most sense for you to go find. How does your brain work from an organizational standpoint for you to start developing your folder system? Uh, Thank you, Carolyn. And then Lori asked, how can you get the recording? Since you registered for the webinar, usually what I do, Lori, is I will get this posted and send you a YouTube link sometime this afternoon. And so you'll get, uh, hang on, I'll just go into that next one. Next slide. There we go. Oh, let me go through this. I'll go through them one more time. Okay. So I'm gonna go from bottom to the top since I was talking about that. So later on today, check your email. I sent out to everyone who registered for the webinar. You'll get a copy of the recording or a link to the recording on YouTube. You'll get a copy of the webinar notes for everything I talked about. I'll go back and edit them a little bit, and so that way it's a little more succinct. So you can watch the webinar and you've got written notes to go by. You'll get that. Uh, you'll also get the My Keyworder for Lightroom link. And then also, if you haven't downloaded the cheat sheets from a website, or if you have downloaded the cheat sheets from a website, I've got an extra one I'm going to give to you today that all has this basic sort of Lightroom workflow that we talked about today. And so you can add that to your list. So you'll get all that sometime today. And so I'm going to go backwards. Send me your webinar ideas. This webinar idea came up from last time I requested webinar ideas and asked people if what they wanted to see. And so I got a lot of good ideas in, and this is one of them. So even more, if you've got good webinar ideas, just let me know. The 2026, I'm so blessed when I say this. We've sold out of 2025 on all the workshop spots. I've got the 2026 workshop schedule announced. We're starting to fill up on some of those trips as well. If there's anything there you're interested in, cruise over to the website. We've got a lot of really neat places we're going to next year and a lot of really neat stuff that we'll get to see. And then again, if you haven't downloaded the cheat sheets in a while, they went through an update about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so there's a few more in there, and then you're going to get the extra one today. And so with that said, stay in touch. Sometimes it may take me a day or two to answer emails, but I always answer emails. But Russell at hackberryfarmtexas.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from people and always a pleasure to get to talk to people about photography and why we love doing what we do, because it's a long time passion of mine. It's how I feed my family. And so I'm always eager to help folks out with whatever they need help with. So stay in touch there. And with that, golly, look at that. It's 1 hour. I know when I'm looking at my watch. With that, we've spent our hour together. And so if you have any other questions, I'll stick around before I turn everything off, put them in the chat. If you don't have any questions, I will talk to you soon and stay in touch. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I'm going to tell you guys thank you and I will talk to y'all soon. Take care.